All right, everybody, welcome into Sideline Fantasy. We are going to be talking about week 3 of the NFL season, or our fantasy season in particular. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, the 0-2, Crimmy Charles. Welcome in. How you doing?
Pretty good. Looking for a great week from Kyle Allen this week, apparently. So let's go, Kyle Allen.
Yeah, and I know you did not proclaim yourself as the number one team in fantasy by any means. That was kind of proclaimed by everybody else. But 0-2 with Zeke and McCaffrey, everyone basically handed you the championship before the season. You got to be. Are you quite in panic mode? A little nervous? What's going on in Crimmy's head?
No, I mean as important as those first 2 weeks can be to give you an upper hand in regards to obviously tiebreakers later on in the year, they're also can be taken with a grain of salt with losses for me at least in my mind because I play you guys again. So I mean I played the second highest scoring team in the first week, lost. That was a given because you had the three highest scoring players in the damn league, and then lost a close game to you last week. So it sucks and it look at, but in my mind I'm not really out of it. So I'm okay where I'm at.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and yeah, weeks 3 through 5 are going to be some big ones here. We're still obviously in the divisional play so far. I'm actually surprisingly the second highest scoring team in the league. I hate doing the what if thing, but I'd really like to be 2-0. But yeah, me and Chad right now are two highest scoring teams in the league, and I might. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But anyway, let's move on to the transactions here before we move on to the matchups. There were no trades this week, so this will be a little bit of a shorter show since we don't have to kind of dissect the who's and the what's of the trades. But let's look at the transaction while you're here. No surprise to anyone really. Demarcus Robinson went off and went off quick. 30 points is a lot. That pickup, although 30 points, that looks even bigger now with Antonio Brown in the situation he's in. Tori cannot catch a break with her team whatsoever. Antonio Brown is no longer on a team, which means she has to put Demarcus Robinson in basically as her number two receiver. That's really tough. But again, that move was made before the Brown news. I think she's enjoying every bit of those 30 points spent right now because she needs a receiver.
Yeah, as much as 30 points can be played off, not played off as not a lot, but like if you're desperate for somebody like that, and if Tori had known that AB was not going to be on a team any longer, I think it's justified for sure. But even then, like spending 20, 30 points on Marcus Robinson to me, kind of a lot, just because of his role is there for now. But who's to say what happens once Tyreek comes back? So obviously, it's worth the gamble if you get the same production out of him once Tyreek is back, but you won't know for a couple weeks anyway. So
Yeah, the first 2 weeks in Kansas City, it's kind of been pick a receiver and they'll go off. Week one, Sammy Watkins. Week two, Robinson. Maybe it'll be Hardman this week. I mean, he was already good last week, but it'll be interesting there. The second one surprised me quite a bit. Ebron, which I was surprised was dropped by you initially, he's owned in about 66% of leagues. He has 33 receiving yards on the year. He got a touchdown last week, which made his week. I mean, 10 points out of a tight end in fantasy is pretty good, as long as you don't have one of the elite ones where you expect a little bit more. But 28 points on Ebron, that's a lot. What was your take on that?
I mean, I can't see the points spent on my side, so I kind of get that firsthand from you right now. 28 points for Eric Ebron is a lot. Like you're point chasing from 2018 at this point with Ebron because he clearly hasn't shown you anything production wise the first 2 weeks to kind of show you what he did last year wasn't a fluke or the quarterback isn't an issue. So 28 points, I mean, you could have probably gotten him for a good 7.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was even close to 28. I mean, he really wanted to make sure he got him. He got him, but I don't. I'm really curious to see who else put money on him. Interesting one there. The next two up are going to be the San Francisco backfield. Tyler got Jimmy Garoppolo for 10, Mozart for 10. I'll admit I went after Mozart as well. I think I only put 7 on him though, so Tyler was able to get him. That backfield is being shared, and he had a pretty darn good week last week, rushing and receiving. So why not take a flyer on him? I don't mind those pickups for Tyler, especially considering that Drew Brees is gone. But it is a little bit interesting because you do have the San Francisco quarterback, you do have the San Francisco running back. We're gonna get more into his matchup later. I think they have a good matchup this week against the struggling Pittsburgh team, but it'll be interesting to see if those two pickups can keep him afloat because both those guys are inserted in the starting lineup. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, just personal preference. I don't want to spend my fab points on a quarterback whatsoever. If somebody wants to go after a Q and put some points on him, like I might, toss a point at a guy just hoping that everybody else who went after him put a zero and I grab him just because of that. But to put 10 points on a Q, if I know obviously in Tyler's situation it's hard because your quarterback just went down, but you have to like that quarterback for multiple weeks. You can't base it off of just streaming and grabbing a guy for 10 points. So clearly, Tyler likes him for the foreseeable future, but you spend 10 points on Garoppolo. He plays this week for you. Next week, you're in a hole because he's on a bye. So you're kind of back to square one there with no Breeze and no Garoppolo. So you kind of got to make up some ground there. But 20 points overall, grabbing a Q and a running back who can carve out a role for himself until Coleman comes back and kind of throws a wrench into things isn't that bad.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Interesting stuff there, and both of those, like I said, will be in his lineup. A couple few more of note, nothing too crazy. Aguilar, 8 points for Peter. He had a good week last week. He's very, very been hit or miss so far for the most part. I put 6 on Mozart. I put 6 on Frank Gore. I got Frank Gore. He's a workhorse. He got picked up in 37% of leagues this week. He had 15 points last week thanks to getting in the end zone. He's actually projected for another 13 this week. So not a bad little pickup there for me. I do think that's Singletary's job when he gets back, but anytime you can have a starting running back that's just chilling out there, that's not a bad move to make. Your brother, probably not necessary, but spent 5 points on a kicker. Got the Panthers kicker. Also got the Tampa Bay defense, and Jamal Williams is picked up for a measly 1 point by Kyle. Any last thought? I know there's been other pickups throughout the week here. Jamison Crowder was picked up for 2 points by Peter a couple days ago, actually yesterday. And again, 99 yards week one, 40 yards week two. Interesting pickup there. Anything else kind of jump out at you before we get into the matchups?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, with Trey grabbing Sly, and you said throwing a couple points on him, it wasn't necessarily necessary. That's kind of a mouthful there. Uh, that's still the number one kicker in fantasy land. So, like you've said in the past, and I've seen in the past for my very own teams, a kicker can win you weeks very easily. If Sly put
Yeah.
up 16 last week, that's a good receiving performance for a receiver. Even for a running back, it's a solid performance. So to be able to kind of double up there with a kicker isn't bad. And one last thing, I guess, for me is I don't know if Rob has some inside information, but yesterday he grabbed Deontay Johnson and dropped James Washington. I don't know what happened there, but clearly riding that the Big Ben decline there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We'll have to see how that pans out. Obviously, him being a Steelers fan, we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I mean, I'm all for. It's nothing I've really brought up too much yet. I think people are so a lot of times they're so used to the way things are set up that I feel like this would get voted down heavily. But going back to that kicker statement, I would be very much for just getting rid of the kicker in fantasy total. If I'm in a matchup with someone and a kicker puts up 16 on me and I lose by like 2, I'm heated. I mean, I am heated. It is frustrating, but as of right now, that is fantasy. So let's move into the matchups. Krim, obviously it shows whoever's looking at the screens matchup first. So we will go to my matchup. Me versus Dana. And last week we had a lot of 1-0s versus 0-1s. Me and you were the only 0-1-0-1, and then there was one other 1-0-1-0. We've talked about before, and I'll say it again. These week 3 through 5 games are huge. This is a divisional game, and you play this team once all year. So if you guys both end up 8-5, this will be the week you look at. If you both end up 7-6, these will be the weeks you look at. So weeks 3 to 5 are so important because they're divisional and you play them one time. We have a 2-0, 0-2 matchup in Kyle Tyler, 0-2, 0-2 in Tori and Peter. Chad and Rob's a 2-0, 2-0. That's a big one. And then, you and Jay is 0-2, 0-2. So there's a lot of stuff that can swing the tide here and stuff. And the first matchup we'll talk about is me and Dana's. And I'm 1-1. Dana's 2-0. And surprisingly, I have some pretty good matchups this week, I feel. And I know you can't always totally look at projections, but me and Dave are both projected for a lot of points this week and kind of by a lot. I'm projected for 118. I like the matchups. I think Lamar Jackson against KC is still going to do a really good job. I think that's going to be a really good game this week. That's one of the best games of the week. Marlon Mack is very hit or miss for me. He's going to run for 150 or he's going to run for 50. He does not catch the ball. Josh Jacobs against that Minnesota defense, I think, is going to be one of the ones to look out for as well. I am going to Hollywood Brown this week. I feel like that Kansas City defense has not shown much at all, and I feel like he can have another big game. On the other side, what is New England going to do? Are they going to decide to win by 30 running the ball or throwing the ball? As dumb as it sounds, I do think quarterback's going to be a big one here. Does Tom Brady go off? We'll find out. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak too much on it, but what do you think about this matchup between me and Dana? Dana's 2-0. I mean, he's leading the division, and I'm projected to beat him by 15 this week because of matchups. What do you think?
Yeah, obviously it's big. There are a lot of good matchups here. That just to begin with, you obviously pointed out the biggest one in my eyes is Kansas City Baltimore. You have two key players there. Dana has another key player on that side of things with Ingram, so that's pretty big. And I mean that Philadelphia Detroit game, Dana's relying on two guys as well. Sorry, he actually has two guys in that Kansas City Baltimore game with his kicker, which, like you just said, can make or break your week. So,
Yeah, two
that
pass
game,
catchers from Detroit, yeah.
yeah, that game, and then the Detroit Lions game. I mean, I'm high on Stafford this week because we've seen in the first 2 weeks that Philly, the secondary at least, isn't too strong, so he can kind of get going, and it just depends on the game script for Stafford if he's going to be pass heavy or not. I know the team's trying to stay away from that because it gets them into trouble at times, but when that front seven's working, they're going to have to find other ways around it. So I feel like this is one of those matchups, and like they're going to be very close because the projection says you're going to win by 13. I buy in the projections somewhat, but I think this game will be closer just looking at it, on paper at least. But yeah, the X factors are your quarterbacks. I feel like those guys have carried your guys' teams for the first 2 weeks, and they're going to have to do it once again if one of you guys is going to come out on top.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's crazy to think, but I mean, a 1-1, 2-0 matchup in the division this early, it swings. I mean, if Dana goes to 3-0, I'm already down 2 games in the division. If I beat him, I'm ahead of him in the division. I mean, this is such a big swing week for so many teams. Being down 2 games in the division with 10 to go, that might not sound like a lot, but I mean that's a decent lead early in the season. While me beating him this week, all of a sudden I'm in front of him. So very big swing week for sure. The next one game up is going to be your game here, which is Jay against you. Jay, again, very similar to Tori, cannot catch a break. For being a PPR league, his team has been abysmal to this point. When I liked it heading into the season, he has 134 points through 2 weeks. He is not even averaging 70 points a week to this point. His team's been very disappointing, and I know it's just a defense, but his defense has gotten him 1 point. If you have an elite defense, you're hoping for around that 10-point mark. But even still, if you don't, you still want 6 or 7 from your defense, and he got 1. Some of the matchups I'm looking at this week, can Stephon Diggs get going? He got a really kind of broke free touchdown last week, and that's really all he's done this year. Very worried about Stephon Diggs. That LA Cleveland matchup's going to be huge. He's got Goff and Cooks. Can the Browns step up? That's going to be a really big Sunday night game as well. Honestly, the biggest one to me, Joe Mixon. Through 2 games, the Bengals have been getting beat so bad that Mixon has not been able to get going at all. He's got 7.2 points through 2 games. Joe Mixon, who was debatably a first-round pick this year. So he needs to get going if Jay wants to get going at all this week. I honestly think you just have the matchups this week. I think they're going to give Zeke the ball. Miami Dolphins, he might run for 200 for all we know. McCaffrey's going to have to be the workhorse in Carolina. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, he's going to get touches regardless. So he's got all the opportunity in the world there. I think Thielen breaks free a little bit more against Oakland this week. We'll see. Obviously, your big stretch here is tight end. I mean, that is going to be your struggle point this year for sure. But if your other guys can pick it up, you might not need your tight end as much. But overall, I mean, as much as I like Jay's team heading into the year, I think you're the clear favorite this week. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I can't touch on my own game too much, but I do like my matchups quite a bit. I do have a good matchup in with Zeke to kind of carry the load. Thielen is, up there against a weaker team in Oakland. Lockett's been pretty good, and like you said, tight ends is going to be a problem for not only me but most people throughout the season. Even guys who think they have a somewhat secure one, like OJ Howard for Jay, he had 0 points last week and didn't even. I don't even think he got targeted once. So like that's gonna be hit or miss for most people every week. So I can live with that. Like you said, I'm trying to have other people carry the load at that point. I, I'm not going to guarantee anything. I hope I take this one because if I don't, I don't even know where to go from here.
Yeah, you're going to be in panic mode if you start off 0-3. That's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. But you have the team to come back from it too. I mean, that's also the case.
It is true. I mean, I do have the two top 10 running backs. Running backs are a dime a dozen in this league for the most part. So I have to make a move and move, one of them. I have the firepower to do so, but hopefully I can keep these guys together and just win a damn game.
Yeah, you need it for sure. And with Jay's, I know it's just the defense, but with Jay's defense getting 1 point, that's a pretty good start. Next game up is going to be Chop Squad versus Dave. Um, Dave's off to a really good start because of your defense. I mean, if your defense can give you 15, you're already looking good that week in fantasy. I mean, 9 sacks, it was absolutely ridiculous. Fournette went from looking like an absolute dud that game. I mean, looking like he was going to put up a point, if that, to carving out an okay 12-point performance. I still think Dave wants more from Fournette. I still think he wants him to be a 14 to 16 point back week in and week out, but he was able to carve out 12 points, which was big. And when you pair that with the defense, I think he would have been happy with 27 points combined from those two. And he got that. So I think he's off to a good start in that sense. But I'll tell you what, I know Delaney Walker didn't do what he did last week, but if you can get 10 points from your tight end in fantasy, not named Ertz, not named Kelsey, not named Kittle, you're pretty happy about that. So I don't think your brother's off to the worst of starts either. I think the big matchup is, I mean, do we need to say it for Dave? I mean, what's the big matchup?
For Dave, I'm going to say this, and let the record show. Krim will say this, and you'll say this for weeks. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Oh,
9,
yeah.
10, 11, 12,
Just pre-record
13,
it. Yeah, just got to pre-record
maybe 14, depending on how his team goes, because it will rely on the Chargers every week.
every week. Yep. And I'm curious how they're going to match up against Houston. I think, again, that's going to be one of the better games of the week. Um, how does Keenan Allen do getting opposed by the number one corner? How is Eckler going to do? I think that's going to be a really, really good game. And I'm expecting the Houston defense to step up a little bit. I don't know if he's going to get as much firepower as he wants from those 3 Chargers. We will see. Obviously, Sammy Watkins is a big one as well. Went from 42 points to 8. And honestly, 8 is not a bad number, I think, for Sammy Watkins week in and week out. It's not great because I look at him as a flex. I think that's what he is. I don't think he's going to break out against Baltimore. We'll see that. Baltimore defense is good. Jarvis Landry is kind of off to a slow start as well so far. So you'd like him to step up a little bit. Overall, I will say this. As much as Dave is relying on the Chargers, I do like the matchups a little bit more because I think Baltimore is going to run the clock a lot, try to keep Mahomes and Watkins off the field as much as possible. And Todd Gurley has been good so far this year, no doubt about it, but they have been limiting his carries somewhat. So I don't know if he's going to break free for 25 to 30 against Cleveland. I like Dave a little bit more in this matchup, and he's off to a better start. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this matchup is right down the middle. Honestly, I know Fournette got off to a hot start, and Dave's defense, propelled them over there. But I can see the Bucks taking advantage of a rookie quarterback who hasn't seen, full on starters action. He played well in the preseason, but he's playing mainly second string, third string guys. So having these, top tier guys on the team running at him and kind of flying around the field, for all we know, Daniel Jones can be made out to look like a fool, and the Buccaneers give him 15 as well. So to me,
Right.
that's going to be kind of a big factor. But at the same time, we've had Mahomes. We've seen Mahomes in action, not playing a great defense, obviously, so far this year, but he's somebody who can go out there and score you 35, 40 points as a quarterback. So you're going to hope, obviously, Mahomes and Sammy Watkins can kind of give you that dynamic duo of things and push you over the edge in this matchup because you're going to need it. I'm not sitting there saying either team kind of has an advantage on paper, like going into the week. But obviously, once Thursday night is over, Dave has the advantage, I'd say. But I wouldn't rule out Trey by any means just because of the two strong performances by Dave's two Jaguars.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And again, Trey's off to a nice little 2-0 start, probably his best start in fantasy to this point in all the years he's been in it. Again, projected to lose, but that is one of the games to watch out for. Because again, we talked about it in my matchup. Those 2-0-1-1 is a swing game. You know, Trey could be 3-0 in the division, sitting up top nice and pretty, or Dave could beat him and we could have a cluster at the top. So, big game for sure. Next up is going to be CFLs versus the Dak Street Boys. CFLs right now is 2-0. Highest scoring team in the league, projected to win this one as well. Again, Deshaun Watson, I think James White is someone to look out for against the Jets. Dalvin Cook's been an absolute stud. And going against Oakland this week, I don't see any reason he won't be again. 15, 20 plus points for sure. Excuse me. T.Y. Hilton's questionable going against Atlanta, but he should play. I'm waiting to see Zach Ertz get going a little bit more. Has yet to find the end zone yet, but again, that's the least of his worries right now. I talked a little crap about Christian Kirk last week, and he had 114 receiving yards for him, so that's very good out of the flex position there. I like Chad's against starters. Bench players, a little sketchy, but starters, you got to roll with them. I mean, they've looked really, really good so far. We'll see how DeAndre Hopkins does against LA. On the other side, Rob's off to a good start. I mean, 11 points is not bad from Derrick Henry. It's actually going to be his worst performance of the year, but that's not horrible. And Dak Prescott against Miami again. I have a weird feeling they're going to really focus on the run this week and just control the clock and get out of there in a hurry, which I don't know what that means for Dak. It is the Dolphins, though. But I feel like if anything, Zeke eats and Dak takes a back seat this week, but we will see. I've been saying it for weeks about James Conner. He's got 54 rushing yards in 2 weeks, Krim. Mike Evans has been really bad these first 2 weeks. So this is going to be a really... I honestly think this is one of the more interesting matchups of the week. Rob's, despite being 2-0, I still think he's waiting a little bit for some breakout performances from the likes of Mike Evans and DJ Moore and stuff like that. What's your take?
Yeah, I can give you 4 words that sum up this matchup, essentially, in a nutshell. Dalvin Cook, James Conner. Dalvin Cook can propel Chad's team by himself to a victory in a matchup against Oakland, because if they get up early, which I feel like they will, Dalvin Cook gets a lot of work.
Yep.
Dalvin Cook gets a lot of points. And James Conner, on the other side of things, I feel like James White can easily match Derrick Henry's 11 just because of his catching. Like, he's had...
Easily, yeah, for sure.
He's had 2 solid weeks, you know. He's had 10 plus both weeks.
Right there.
So you're able to kind of match him if you just kind of are on your average. But James Conner, again, he's under that umbrella of that Big Ben regression where you don't have Big Ben. Teams don't respect Mason Rudolph, so they're going to stack that box. Now, that could help Mason. It could help Juju. For Dave, it could help, James Washington, who is not a team right now, or this other dude, the Johnson guy for Rob, who he obviously isn't going to play. So Connor can get balled up again just because the game script's going wrong and they're down pretty quickly, or they're testing Rudolph to throw the ball on the field. So he's relying on a backup quarterback to kind of open up the game for him, and that's tough a lot of the time. So those two guys are essentially going to dictate how these teams perform this week, I feel.
Yeah, and again, this is a really big matchup. You have 2-0 teams here, and not only that, every team. God, I need a drink. All 3 teams at the top of Division 2 are all 2-0. There are 3 2-0 teams and 3 0-2 teams. I mean, the 0-2 teams have to be ecstatic about the 2-0 teams playing each other because they need to catch up. So having 3 2-0 teams at the top and 3 0-2 teams on the bottom, that could be a big gap here. So whoever wins that game can extend that lead even further. Right now, if I had to say, I like Chad's matchups a little bit more, but again, James Conner, he needs to be that kind of first round pick type player that some people expected him to be. We'll see. Next up is Riding Rodgers versus Peter. Obviously, Tori has not taken out Antonio Brown yet, which is why her projections are a little bit lower. But even still, the most she can put in really is Demarcus Robinson at this point, which we talked about earlier. Le'Veon's going to have to carry the team. But here's another thing. Tori would be looking a lot better if Aaron Rodgers was playing a little bit more Aaron Rodgers like. 13 and 14 points from your quarterback in fantasy is not very good. It's Aaron Rodgers. He needs to do more. What else do you see from this matchup?
Yeah, like Rodgers obviously is a big name here. But for me, it's more so on the Peter side of things. Like you kind of know what Tori's team's going to bring to the table every week because you have those guys who are kind of, I wouldn't say middle of the pack guys because there's solid players on our team like Le'Veon and Freeman. Freeman hasn't been playing that great this year, so kind of needed him to bounce back and break out in this game, which he can. They're playing Indianapolis, so they have a chance to do so. But all in all, I mean, to me, it's going to be that Baker Mayfield Odell Beckham connection. I mean, it
Right.
propelled Peter over the top last week, but now you're playing the
Close, yeah.
Rams on Sunday night. Stage is bigger now for Baker and the boys, so and that defense is not something to play around with.
Yeah, I mean, again, big matchup for both teams, both 0-2. They're already 2 games back in the division. Tori's been, and here's the thing, she's still, like you said, Devontae Freeman. What's up with that? I mean, there's no one really sitting behind him that's really take away his production, but he needs to start being that running back. If Devontae Freeman comes out and Aaron Rodgers comes out, she'll be okay. But who knows? Because that Denver defense has looked pretty good so far. So maybe Rodgers kind of gets held in check and win again. On the other side, you mentioned, how does that Rams defense do against Cleveland? I mean, Baker Mayfield has 24 points in 2 weeks. That's not a lot. That's really not a lot. So we'll see what happens there. Kamara against that Seattle defense. Kamara only had 6 points last week. But we'll see. Mike Williams being Peter's number 2. I know he's pretty high on him. I don't know about that. There's just so many people to get the ball to in LA. I think he could use an upgrade at receiver for sure. Breda out there kind of splitting time. He's got Kittle and Breda both on San Francisco there. It'll be interesting. Maybe Gallup would have gotten the start if it wasn't for him being out, and he's going to be out for a little bit. And Peter's rolling the dice again with David Montgomery. He had 13 last week, mainly thanks to a touchdown from the 1 yard line. But we'll see. Going against Washington this week, Monday Night Football, I think he's going to get the ball even more, and he needs to be big for Peter. This is a big, big week for both teams, so we'll see how it pans out. Next and last matchup is going to be Kyle versus Tyler, 2-0 versus 0-2 again, and this is projected to be the closest matchup of the week. Kyle's projected for 103, Tyler's projected for 101, and this is fantasy for you because neither of us like Kyle's team coming in. Both of us like Tyler's team. Kyle's 2-0, Tyler's 0-2. What do you see this week?
I see a lot of sadness for Tyler, mainly because his running backs aren't that good right now. You draft Phillip Lindsay to kind of be your RB2, and now your RB1 is going to try to be Mozart, who kind of emerged last week. It kind of, this is a shitty situation to be in my eyes, because, Damian Williams, who should be your RB1, has McCoy join him, and then his workload's cut, and now he's hurt. So you're kind of just falling down the ladder there with, what you expect from him. And obviously losing Drew Brees isn't something to kind of just scoff at. But I just don't like Tyler's team matchup-wise for any of these games, except for maybe his receivers. Because, Julian Edelman is for sure 10 points every week, and same with Julio for the most part. So those two guys can kind of get theirs on any given day. But everybody else, just except for obviously his kicker and defense, which I won't even touch on, just the matchups there are tougher. So I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah, they are tough. I mean, Julio against Indianapolis. Indianapolis' defense has looked pretty good so far. Greg Olsen, I don't want to say he was an anomaly last week. I love the dude. I liked him as a Bear. He's been really great as a Panther. I don't see him getting 100 yards receiving on most weeks. I just don't. I mean, I think he'd be very happy with 50 yards and a touchdown on most weeks, and he had 14 last week. I don't see that again. You're right, Lindsey. I had him last year. 8 to 12 is what you can expect from him for the most part. And there's rumblings out of Denver. Freeman's looking pretty good back there. There's rumors that Freeman could very well start getting the bulk of those carries soon if Lindsey's going to keep struggling. 13 carries for 36 yards last week for Lindsey. and they play Green Bay defense this week that has been really good at stopping the run so far. So I watch out on that, Philip Lindsay. I mean, we talk about his running backs right now. Williams being out, having to get Raheem. Lindsay's job's up for grabs. I really like Kyle's matchups this week. Carson Wentz against Detroit. I think that Philly Detroit game is going to be a shootout. I really do. It's going to be an interesting one. I think that's going to be a shootout. I think Barkley is going to. I know Tampa's defense has been pretty good this year, granted, but I mean Barkley's good for 15 to 20 point performance week in and week out. Godwin against the Giants. He might get a lot of opportunities. That Tampa Bay offense might be on the field a lot. Who knows how the Giants offense is going to look? And I've really liked Darren Waller so far. As much again, we didn't really like Kyle's team coming in. He's made moves, he's made pickups, he's gotten depth. Probably still looking for depth. I mean, he's got Carlos Hyde on his bench who has 170 yards rushing in 2 weeks. 90 yards rushing last week on 20 carries for Carlos Hyde, and he's on his bench. Peyton Barber, 82 yards and a touchdown last week, is on Kyle's bench. I mean, he's got a lot of depth right now, and Kyle's team's looking really good, not only long term. I mean, look at, again, Robbie Anderson, 80 yards receiving last week on his bench. Kyle's waiting to strike. I think Kyle's waiting for that right trade opportunity to jump back into that upper echelon of teams. And if he can be, 3-1, 4-1, 4-2 by the time that trade happens, he's going to be feeling all right. And quite frankly, I think right now, matchup wise, despite this game projected to be really close, I think Kyle's got it.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle also, I think he has his matchup as well this week. I can't really disagree with you. What I can say is Kyle does not have a kicker. So you're going to have to pick up kicker or play nobody there and kind of bulk up your bench there. But one of those boys on the bench is going to have to be on the waiver wire here soon.
Yeah, no doubt about it, certainly. And I think he might have, I don't know, he might have picked up Josh Allen. He's playing Tyler, right? Is it possible he picked up Josh Allen so Tyler didn't?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think there's a chance like that's.
I mean, he's not starting Josh Allen. You know what I mean? I don't think he is.
You're not playing Allen over Wentz, that's for sure. I mean, Allen's matchup is solid, but
I mean, Kyle's sneaky like that. I've done it in the past. If I had a lot of fab points at the end of the year and I knew my playoff opponent was trying to get someone, I'd do it. I mean, that's strategy, right? And part of me wonders, did Kyle pick him up so no one else did? And he's going to drop him Sunday morning. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's something to look out for. Another thing to mention, Dana's been talking about it to me the last couple days. We forgot to mention this in me and his matchup real quick. He is deciding to not start his first-round pick, Davante Adams, who has been decent this year. Not great, 19 points in 2 games, had a good 100-yard performance last week. I just would like to point that out. He's told me the last 2 days he is not starting Davante Adams. Krim, you heard it earlier. He told us, I am not starting Davante Adams. So if he tries to pull a fast one at 11:59 tomorrow and starts Davante Adams, let it be known, he told me he wasn't doing it. Why? I don't know. I know they're going against Denver. Interesting choice. He says he thinks Galladay's going to have a big week. So be it. But his first-round pick is officially on the bench against me. So with that being said, no trades this week, interestingly enough. We do usually have a lot of trades in this league. Do you see the trade market ramping up after this week? We're 3 weeks in. People are starting to kind of see how their players are going to be on the field this year. You can't look too much at past performance. You have to look at current performance. Is it around week 3 when you start saying, okay, this is how they're going to perform this year?
Yeah, for the most part, I feel like once you see 3 weeks of play that you're going to have an idea of what dudes are going to, are capable of. So you're going to also see where your team is at. If you're 0-3, you're going to have to make a move more often than not to get your team back into things. If you're 3-0, you're sitting pretty, trying to buy and kind of just boost your team at that point. But I do feel like after this week, we'll see probably a good handful of trades coming through.
Yeah, I mean, this especially if teams are 0-3 and if teams are 3-0, you're going to start seeing. I like to call it the desperate time in fantasy, where teams that are lacking a couple of players will trade one of their studs to kind of fill in a couple gaps. I mean, one of those trades last year that did work out for both of us was me and Trey. I traded him Edelman and Lindsey, and he gave me DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, a lot of people looked at that and were like, wow, that's crazy. Trey somehow almost got in the playoffs last year, and that trade actually helped him a lot. So Some teams will get desperate and trade away a couple pieces for one. A lot of people have been trying to go after studs early. I know Kyle's been looking to get a stud. Peter's been looking to get a stud. Dana's been looking to load up from his depth and get a stud. A little early for that. After this week, we might see teams get desperate. So we'll see. With that being said, any last thoughts, Crimmy, before we wrap up?
No, I mean, outside of this team is big for, or this week is big for a lot of teams. I'm just essentially looking at myself for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting exciting. We're into that stretch of the. I mean, we're still early in the season, granted, but we're starting to get in that stretch of the season where we can start looking ahead and going, this is going to be interesting. How is this going to pan out? The pavement is starting to get placed on the road, I should say, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. You're 0-2, Peter's 0-2. Both of you guys were, big players last year. It'll be fun. It's gonna be fun. So, with that being said, thanks for listening into Sideline Fantasy Week 3. Good luck to all your fantasy teams except for Dana's because he is playing me. And have a good weekend of watching some football. Take care.